folks, and welcome to the show. Today's topic, I'm sure, will be challenging and enjoyable. It is nuclear catastrophe and the dystopia that follows. We'll talk about anything on this show, as you know. We'll talk about monarchies, and we'll talk about evildoers, and we'll even talk about interesting trips that have recently happened to our two guests. First of all, in the studio, the incomparable and well-attired Iwo Bender. Not tired, well-attired.
Very tired, yes.
Yeah, and also slightly weepy, but never mind. Yeah, it is. What day is it? Don't say.
It's a Wednesday.
It's Friday or Saturday? Friday or Saturday?
It's Saturday.
Okay, we don't want to get into that. And on the horn from Bydgoszcz, our fellow traveler, Tony McFarlane Gonzalez. How are you? How are you, Anthony?
Glad to be back home.
Good to be back home. Well, I don't know who to start with. Both of you have been on trips recently. I was on a trip too, but it required merely mushrooms and closing the blinds. So a little bit different from what you guys were on. Ivo, you recently were in Sweden.
That's correct.
Why don't you give us a little brief before we come to the Ukraine trip that Anthony
well, I mean, Sweden, well, it was actually the island of Gotland, which is actually a fairly large, sizable island in the middle of the Baltic, which has its own identity, own dialect, own flag. It's also...
Is it transgender identity?
No, it's Gottish or Gutish.
I guess, well, you can be anything you want to be nowadays. So.
You can, but I don't think that your everyday Gotlander really bothers that much with these things. He's too busy actually working. You know, they are farmers. They make the best potatoes in Europe, and well, plant the best potatoes in Europe. Yeah. And but anyway, so it's
are they related to Scottish? You call them Gottish.
Well, no, we don't really know. I mean, it's a very ancient place.
I'll turn to Tony on that question if you can't answer it.
It's been inhabited for thousands of years. It was super important during the Viking era.
Yeah.
Then was there was a story in it, and there's several ones actually. It was thriving till the 14th century, when it was invaded by the Danes, and about a third of all men died. At the Battle of Visby, the beautiful medieval town, which is still surrounded.
Is that where we get the name for the flying disc from?
That's
the frisbee?
From Visby. Frisbee from Visby.
Visby, not
Visby,
frisbee.
Yes. So anyway, and so it's a tale of prosperity cut short. It never really recovered since 1361, but it's still an extremely important strategic point because it's really a giant aircraft carrier that you cannot sink in the middle of the Baltic Sea. And the Russians, when they were bragging before the war started, in December last year, they were saying that they're going to take Gotland. Needless to say, it's it was one of the Russians.
Then they could say Gotland.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, yeah. And anyway, so Gotland is now remilitarized. I think there are several regiments of Swedish soldiers sort of hanging out there. So even there, even on the now bucolic island, which is peppered with rune stones and has 92 Romanesque churches, like nowhere else in Europe, which are perfectly preserved, even there, the war drums are heard.
What does that mean? I mean, they have like Indians or something?
No.
It's like drums along the Mohawk, that great Gary Cooper movie?
I was actually referring to Lepanto by Chesterton, but anyway.
Lepanto.
Yes.
And I'm a big fan of Chesterton, but tell me why. Tell us why.
Well, no, it's a story.
That's true. I am a big fan. And Hilaire Belloc.
There is a great
first job, Catholic Universe.
There you
First job, Catholic Universe, London.
Well, Lepanto is a great, epic poem which actually starts with a very onomatopoeic phrases that sort of create this feeling of almost hearing the war drums that are being struck all over Europe.
What is they're worried about the Russians attacking?
Of course, they're very worried about Russians attacking.
In a nuclear way.
Well, not
Or how?
well. Who knows, right? I mean, the original plan that the Russians were
Tony wants to jump in.
Were kind enough to share
We're going
with
to come
us.
to you, Tony.
That they were kind enough to share with us on television last year was that they will actually land troops on Gotland and establish their base of anti-ship and anti-air missiles and basically control the Baltic from Gotland, which is actually very, that's what it is.
Well, you've already got Kaliningrad, haven't you?
Well, yes, but
so you have the idea is
way
have both,
off
yeah?
to the side, and Gotland is very centrally located.
Kaliningrad is between Lithuania and Poland on
correct.
the Baltic.
It's a little exclave of Russia.
Yeah, people don't.
Yeah. But
People don't know.
But Gotland is actually, potentially, it's a much better base to have superiority in the air.
But with what Russians would they be able to? With which Russian army?
Well, precisely. I'm going to kick your butt, but you and whose army, right? So
I think the Swedish army is probably a lot better, isn't it? I don't think I'd want to tangle with them.
Well, it's been a while since they fought a war, so we don't know.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of pent-up rage. Remember that guy in the island in Norway?
Well, that's a different country. But anyway, so no, I mean,
well, they're next door to each other.
They're extremely well trained, very well equipped. Actually, you see the soldiers now, even at the airport in Stockholm last night. There were Swedish soldiers moving about. So it's
pretty close to Bornholm, isn't it?
Well, not really. It's really sort of projecting south from
towards Denmark,
towards Poland. Really, I mean, it's
Poland.
It's
Where's Bornholm then?
Bornholm is way off towards Denmark to the west. So
Bornholm is further closer to Denmark.
Yeah, Gotland is really centrally located, central North Baltic. So,
gosh, I'm glad we cleared that up for me at least. Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm sure everybody else knows. But
and it's also a fantastic place to spend your summer. Beautiful beaches, very beautiful nature, and those 92 amazing Romanesque churches from the 10th to the 13th century. Nothing like it anywhere else in Europe.
Mm-hmm. And the Romans, of course, believed that you get 61 virgins when you die. Wasn't it the Romans? Tony, how are you?
61 virgins. I think you got the wrong religion on that one, brother.
Did I? I thought it was the Romans.
And 72 anyway.
72 Romans?
Yeah, 72 Romans.
Okay. I don't know.
They did find
I'm supposed to know some history?
They did find a lot of Roman artifacts.
I've been on Snapchat all night.
in Gotland, I mean.
I'm on Hee-Haw or TikTok or whatever it is.
Tony,
I'm on both.
I apologize.
I'm on both.
There's nothing I can do.
No,
I know.
I'm oxygen
We gotta
depraved
this
today.
topic.
Oxygen depraved. Okay. Tony, before we talk about Armageddon, because there's lots to talk about, I'll just say this. Hold on, everybody, because we were talking about this seriously, and I remember having discussions. One of our panelists there's no way that there could ever be a nuclear war. I mean, this guy's never going to do it. But intelligence sources have been talking about this before the war began. In March, there was a lot of talk about it between intelligence sources, a lot of worry. Warsaw as a target, possibly, and no response being part of the problem from if there were an attack on Warsaw, because of not wanting to blow up the world, which is probably a good idea. Although, yesterday, standing in line at what's that place called? The big supermarket over there.
Auchan?
Huh?
Auchan?
No, Auchan's okay. Auchan's a bit annoying. There's another one, even bigger, Carrefour. Standing in line at Carrefour, I was looking around going, okay, maybe we all deserve to die. There's a lot of pushing going on and shoving, scrums. Remember that Monty Python skit where the grandmothers attacked people with their umbrellas? It was kind of like that. Kind of like that.
No.
And you begin to think, hey, maybe not such a bad idea to cull the herd. You know what I mean? Why not? At any rate, we'll all see Jesus sooner than we think. So, Tony, you just made a trip to Ukraine. What's the mood over there? And tell us about your trip, please.
Well, the trip was long.
To Ukraine,
but,
not the Ukraine. I don't want any woke people. I do, actually. If you were woke, please write in about that article. Please do, so I can rip you apart.
The Ukraine. The trip went well. It was a long trip. We did a lot of strategic companies and talks with the Ukrainian military and the MOH. We're also starting the talks about rebuilding Ukraine. There has to be a massive build on it. We've talked about the Marshall Plan with them, how to use the Marshall Plans as a baseline. But
is that rebuilding before or after the tactical nuclear strikes?
We didn't think about the tactical nuclear strikes, but it's a possibility of that. And
we're going to talk about that. But go ahead.
Yeah. So they already have had a Marshall Plan presented to the EU. It was not a very robust plan, so we asked them to revise it because they are not talking about the external parts of the cities. So outside of Kiev, outside of Kherson, Kharkiv, Odessa, any other towns that were extremely devastated, things of that nature, that's what they need to focus on and then expand out. That's what we looked at that we're missing in their plans. We're talking trillions, if not tens of trillions of dollars to reinvest into Ukraine to get it back to its original form, if not better. And actually it's a double-edged sword because it works well for them to modernize Ukraine from the old parts that still had Russian architecture and Russian infrastructure. But at the same time, they're following through a extremely hard time right now where they are, it's going to be massive. So it was very bad.
What do they estimate? Can I ask you this, Tony? They estimate, for example, the damage from the hurricane, what is it called, Ian, in South Florida on the Gulf Coast. The obliteration of Fort Myers and Sanibel Island. Sanibel Island has now been called uninhabitable, one of the richest islands in the country. Now uninhabitable, I'm reading, so maybe you saw that too. They're saying the cost may be as much as $250 billion to rebuild this part of Florida. What would the cost be to rebuild even worse destruction across eastern Ukraine?
We're looking at tens of trillions of dollars because it's a complete infrastructure rebuild.
Yeah. Where is that going to come from?
That's a good question.
And who needs,
we asked them to...
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. We've talked about them, and if they did have that kind of push and pull that they need to, and they actually should rightfully deserve to because they took on the second largest army in the world and are absolutely handing their ass to them. But they need to repartition.
Sorry, what are they handing to them? Cash?
Cash, definitely cash. They're
handing them cash, okay. They shouldn't be doing that.
Butts. B-U-T-T.
But you said their cash, so maybe they should be. I don't know.
Exactly. That's what we told them, to talk to and hold them accountable to the United Nations and the EU to have them repartition their money back from them. And it's just hold them accountable for their actions. But that's just one thing. But we don't know where the rest of the funds are going to be coming from.
Gosh. Yeah, we don't know. And trillions, I mean, it's hard to come up with, the governments all just gave away trillions and trillions in COVID when they should have kept the businesses open. And, they were worried about, I don't know. There's so many, are they ironies or just, sadnesses? So when we talk about how much it's going to take to rebuild Florida or Ukraine or whatever, one of these two, or any other disaster that might happen because of blowing things up, and then I go back and look at COVID. I mean, it's much more dangerous to society what's going on now, and the talking about nuclear war, even on a limited scale, than COVID ever could be, in terms of percentage. And in terms of risk, just risk. Yes, I'll take COVID, Let's, which is what we all, who were pretty sensible, said, give us a vaccine and we'll take COVID and we'll just take our chances. I mean, I got it, I had a few effects, but as you can see, I'm still not normal. At any rate, what? What did I say? I'm feeling good, I mean.
Oh, so, yeah.
No, talk about it, of course, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so, it's all fine. It's all fine.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
I've known you so long. When you say that, I feel reassured. Help! It's like, Mama! Because these guys are all talking about what was the buzz on nuclear stuff when you were there? Plus, oh, and by the way, Kherson, they're advancing on and cutting.
Yes, they are.
I'm reading their article. They're cutting them off just like we talked about, started 2 months ago. And they're cutting that army off. They're going to be left there. There's no way they can get out.
None. And that's the whole thing. It's what we talked about with the examples from World War II and how Poland was surrounded when the Germans were coming to that hill attack. I forget the historical name of that attack that they had, but
Which one?
that's exact. The one that started the Polish War in World War II.
Oh gosh. Well,
I know.
the beginning was Westerplatte, up in, and then there were several other attacks coming out of Prussia, to the south and north, and South Prussia too, advancing across.
It's the one that lieutenant or captain that held off.
Yeah.
Very, very few numbers.
I know what you mean.
It's called Wisna.
Wisna. Yeah.
Wisna. Yep,
I filmed there for Poland Daily Travel. It's a fascinating story, isn't it, Ivo? It's one of they came, the Germans under, was it Guderian, I believe, advanced on the Poles from Prussia, south.
Well, I mean, it was fairly easy to attack Poland at that time because there was obviously Germany to the west, there was Eastern Prussia to the north, and then also Czechoslovakia was already under the German control, so they actually...
And Silesia.
And they attacked from the south as well. And
Breslau.
Then the Soviets attacked from the east, so we were literally boxed in. So,
But Wisna, I would recommend to anyone to go there. It's also a beautiful part of the country. It's where two fine rivers come together, including the Nerev.
And literally, this is right next door to my family sort of old nest, where my ancestors actually lived.
Which was?
Right next to Wisna, which is called Strękowa Góra.
I've been there. That's where the hill is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly where the Last Stand hill. I compared it to Custer's Last Stand.
Well, but, let's put it this way. You can question Custer's, shall we say, moral standing, and you cannot possibly question the moral standing of the soldiers of Wisna, who were, by the way...
No, it's a very good point.
Made famous by the song 40 to 1.
40 to 1? I don't know the song. Let's look it up, but send it to me. But, so that's really interesting. Now, your comparison to that is...
The comparison is that they had no support. I'm talking about the Russians. The Russians are being completely cut off because they have no support from home. Supply lines are completely gone. They're running dry. The soldiers, are reports coming in that they're actually running away without their boots to match their tracks. And you know that the ground is really cold already. It's starting to be frozen over. So that's what I'm saying, that they are being enveloped by the Ukrainians, and this counteroffensive is like a blitzkrieg. And I hope that the momentum that the Ukraine has right now does not slow down. That is the biggest fear that I have, is that they will lose the momentum. Losing the momentum is going to be devastating.
Like Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg. It was all about momentum. You know that battle. We talked a little bit about it. Yeah. You've been there.
Very, very much so. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful battlefield, but eerie as all get out.
Oh, you said it.
The creepy feelings you get.
You said it.
But that's the kind of feeling that the Ukrainians have already. I hope that they've already established that baseline where they're going to be able to push the supplies out to their soldiers so they can keep forward and moving forward and resupply the men and equipment to get the push forward even more, so they can regain and get all total control of all territories lost with this unjust invasion.
Very good. Could you tell us a little bit more about your trip and some of the other, getting in and out of Ukraine these days? And I mean, just how long did it take to get across the border? Those kind of things. Is there a lot of traffic? What does it look like?
The traffic it's a lot harder going into the Ukraine now than it was in the beginning. That's the longest part that took. It took us 6.5 hours, I think almost 7, to get in there. And it was a lot harder on the Polish side than the Ukrainian side. The Poles are extremely, extremely vigilant and at the same time, they really are apprehensive with more of the humanitarian aid, especially guys like us that are actually doing diplomatic actions and helping out the Ukrainians and Poles at the same time to protect themselves. Yeah, that's the only thing. But once we got to the Ukrainian side, we were gone within 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and we're off. They're
Was
like,
that because you went through a special line, or you had a special
negative
letter? Or?
We went through we didn't have we had a special letter, but that didn't even matter on the Polish side. But the Ukrainian side, yes, that absolutely helped out because we had all the letters in line with all the equipment that we had to carry, and that helped us 15 minutes gone.
And why so long, do you think, on the Polish side again?
Security.
In what sense security? What are they looking for? Coming from this side? I can understand coming into the country, but coming from Poland.
So smuggling illegal contraband,
like
anything
what?
of that
Like
nature that
anything.
we have no clue.
Could be guns, could be anything.
Yeah, but you can't be smuggling weapons without the letters, or military equipment without letters pre-approved from the MOH or MOD. So that's one of the things that they had already aligned, and we had to show both the Polish and the Ukrainian letters of authorization.
Very interesting.
But even that, they still made us go through the X-ray, not the X-ray, but the dog sniffing and the complete and utter check of all of our equipment. We had to take it all out from the truck and then put it back on. And then the Ukrainian side was nothing. We had the letters from the Ukraine, MOH, MOD, done. Arrivederci, have fun.
Were there drivers? Where'd you go through? Medica? No.
No, it was the one north of Medica.
Kościelna. No, Kościół.
No. It's okay. So there's two north. Yes, that's the one that's closest to Helm.
Helm, the main road then. That's the main road, the Kiev road, once you get on the other side, but also convenient to Lviv from the north side.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Ivo, we got a couple of minutes or a minute and a half before we go. What do you think we should look forward to in the second half of the show? What should we talk about?
I would say we should look forward to a slightly more structured conversation.
You think so?
I think so. I think we might even try to focus on the main topic that you have announced at the beginning of the A block, namely nuclear Armageddon, which is, contrary to popular belief, no laughing matter.
Well, I like to hold the best for last.
Okay. So I retract my timid criticism.
No, I like to hold
very timid.
But don't you remember, we'll just close off with this, don't you remember that beautiful scene, I know you don't like the film, and I know why, in Strangelove, Dr. Strangelove, the Kubrick film, where Slim Pickens is riding the atom bomb like a bronching horse down onto Moscow.
Indeed, and that was then,
that's not funny?
Well, you know, in a sense, it copied the Soviet propaganda. So that is my least favorite Kubrick film.
I know, we've talked about this. We've talked about it. And I see your point. There are a lot of things that didn't need to be so sarcastically. It's the sarcasm and the film that is pretty difficult to deal with in that subject. Didn't have to be that way.
He's done much better.
Master of irony.
Much better things.
He's a master of irony. He was. Okay, Tony, stay with us. Everybody else, stay with us. And we'll see you after these fascinating messages, which we are going to watch with rapt attention. Have you ever noticed how fast those people are moving in that trailer? Getting on the train, or on or off?
They're in a hurry. They want to go. They don't want to be late for work.
I wish I had that kind of energy. You probably do. I don't. Tony does. He's a cyclist, championship cyclist, and his wife's even better. Who wins the race? You or your wife?
It depends on the machine, but normally she does.
Your wife can beat you in a bicycle race.
In a TT, yeah. Mountain biking, no.
We need to get you on steroids immediately. We need to, no, I'm going to call Lance Armstrong. He's the expert. And we're going to make you Anthony Legstrong, okay? Is that okay?
No,
Yeah,
that
all right.
works.
Now, I promised that we were going to talk about the serious topic now. Nuclear war. I'm going to treat it as seriously as everybody else seems to be treating it. Actually, we said before, we've been talking about the intelligence, not we particularly on the show, we did have a couple of discussions, but the intelligence has been on this from the beginning. And Anthony, you know more about that perhaps, or even than I do. But we're getting close, and you say the Swedes are getting prepared in case the Russians make a move. But how would they make that move? We don't know. How would a nuclear strike proceed? What kind of strength? Where? And what would be the response? These are the main questions, I think. Wrong! Remember that guy?
Well, the United States has already warned Russia and has already made plans. They are already including plans to have an equal response, if not a worse response, to Russia, but they don't know the type of plans that they're doing. This has been in the works since February, March timeframe, when they started already seeing the ability of Russia to move into Ukraine in the invasion. But Sweden and Finland have already been preparing. They're one of the best armed militaries in Europe. They have been preparing for decades against the maniacal idiot that we have on our hands. But yeah, they know that he's able and capable to do that kind of strike because he's used thermobaric bombs in Ukraine. I don't know how many he's used. I can't recall. It's probably 8 or 9 of them. It was right at the beginning. It was more of a shock and awe to basically put the Ukraine on its heels, which it did. It worked brilliantly to put them on the heels. But I mean, of course, that's not nuclear yield, but it still did effectively.
How does it compare to a tactical nuclear? Do you know offhand? Anybody?
Yeah, I do. It's actually 20 times more powerful than a tactical nuclear yield. And the tactical nuclear yield one would be a smaller variant of their full blast nuclear, depending on whether or not how many warheads are in their ballistic missiles, if they're still working. That's the other thing, too, that's actually kind of dangerous, if they're still working and capable of being able to launch.
Well, what if the problem is they start to launch them and they blow up on them?
That's a massive, massive implication on the environment
Isn't
around
that
the
a
world.
real problem, perhaps? I mean, if everything is as badly maintained as their present equipment, I mean, just horrendously maintained, and a lack of spare parts even more now at the beginning of the war, probably before. What do you think, Ivo?
Oh, well, where to start? Okay, so ever since Russia or the Soviet Union built their own nuclear devices back in the 40s, that basically we had a situation in which there was a standoff because of the idea of MAD, or mutually assured destruction. So both major nuclear powers knew that if one moves, the other one moves and everybody dies, which in a sense kept us from having a major war. There were proxy wars fought between the allies of the two major powers, so, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, a bunch of other places. And at the same time, what the Russians were doing, the Soviets at that time were doing, was trying to deplete the will of the West through all kinds of special operations, through what they call the active measures. And the active measures, actually, in the slang of the Soviet, KGB or GRU, are actually what you would actually think they're passive measures, because it's influencing the discourse in the West. It's trying to make it hate itself. It's trying to basically put the West in such a position that if the Russians, the Soviets, attacked, no one would really be motivated to defend it, because they were still making war plans in the 90s with a all-out assault, armored assault into Western Europe, thinking that in a case like this, if they have a first nuclear strike, then tanks would roll through this desert and capture all of Western Europe. Actually, the Polish army, the Soviet-controlled Polish army, was supposed to capture Denmark, for instance. So that was the idea. So a standoff, and but you work sort of psychological operations on the West long term, make them sort of vulnerable and unwilling to defend, because if they hate what they are supposed to defend, they will not defend it, and then strike. So it kept us safe from nuclear war for a good 50 years.
But this propaganda campaign's been going on the whole time.
The propaganda campaign has been
from the Soviet-Russian
absolutely.
side.
Yeah. And what happened is that in the end, it was futile, because in the end it was the Soviet side that became demoralized and became bankrupt with the actions of Reagan, Thatcher, the Saudis, and of course Pope John Paul II. So very briefly. And however, after the Cold War ended, all the weapons stayed in Russia. Russia was not denuclearized, and suddenly it tries to play an active nuclear card, saying, "Oh, we have nuclear weapons. We know you have nuclear weapons." And so now, in a sense, it's beginning to be...
So why aren't you acting responsibly?
Exactly.
We have them too, a lot more.
Exactly. So it's a game, you know, in game theory, it's the game of chicken, right? So
yes.
Two cars facing each other, and then start their engines and go towards each other, and whoever swerves first loses.
I prefer to call that the rebel without a cause paradigm.
Well, I would say,
but actually, they're next to each other toward the cliff. Same thing.
Yeah. So basically, we are now in the game of chicken. So who will believe whom?
My God, it's a terrible game now.
Well, you know, let's put it this way: if you have rational actors, right, so-called rational actors.
If you have rational actors, you don't get to this point.
You should not get to this
right?
point.
Okay.
So now. You know, it's extremely difficult to predict what's going to happen.
Are you worried?
I am worried. But of course...
Do you feel physically worried?
No, I mean...
Or is it intellectual?
You know, you're going to go one day anyway, right?
You're going to go. But you don't want the whole world to go. Well, actually, when you go,
well, and the worrying words,
the
which
world
again,
does go.
and in the worrying words that were uttered by Putin several years ago, you know, what's the point of having a world if there is no Russia in it? And he has actually, you know, painted himself into a corner.
But nobody wants there not to be a Russia.
Well, yes, exactly.
Except him.
Except him thinking. And this is the, you know, Russia says, well, we want to defend, you know, to have defensible borders. But nobody wants to attack you.
No, people would like to visit Russia as tourists and spend money.
Yeah. So,
but they're so paranoid, you can't do it. Or it's difficult.
Well, again, it has very deep historical roots, but it would be so helpful if they just sort of woke up and said, look, nobody wants your land. Keep it. You know, of course you're mismanaging it.
Can't somebody tell them that?
Well, I guess...
Can't we just all tell it? Can we arrange a worldwide shout?
I think you know, there needs to be an intervention. You know,
it should be
guys. You know, it's not that everyone is after you, really. You know.
No, Konchalovsky, the director. I'm going to say this. I've said it before. When I interviewed him, he, of course, brother Mikhailov,
Karamazov.
No. Nikolai, his brother's a director.
Oh yeah, of course, his name.
Nikolaev.
No.
He did
Burned by the Sun.
Burned by the Sun. I've met the guy.
Mikhalkov.
Mikhalkov, that's right. They have a different name, all their brothers, right? And they were related to Tolstoy. They go all the way back to Tolstoy. Okay, so I interviewed Konchalovsky, who's very much a gentleman. His brother's a Putin supporter. Konchalovsky's very much not. He's a Tolstoy supporter, which is a side of sanity and peace. And I said, oh, Russia and America. I remember Norman Mailer said they were two sides of the same coin. And Konchalovsky said, no, that's not, sorry, William, that's not correct. I said, okay, you're the master, you tell me. He said it's more like Russia's more like Mexico, run by narco gangs, you know, and they're not even well-run narco gangs, are they?
Well, let's not forget
I mean, Pablo Escobar was a little better at running things.
That Potemkin village is a concept that comes from, 18th century Russia, but it runs even deeper. You know, it's the sad and terrifying history of Russia since the Mongol invasion in the middle of the 13th century, and we're in a sense we're still, and the Russians are still suffering from the results of this historical event. In a sense, just as I was talking about Gotland earlier, you know, something that happened several hundred years ago can have very lasting effects. So in Gotland, basically, its economy collapsed and it stopped being a central economic hub for the Baltic region. And in case of Russia, its psyche collapsed and created a political structure that is at the same time, suicidal in a sense.
This absolutism combined with
and expansionist. So it's sad. It's sad, and we are suffering consequences of that long historical process. And is there a way out? I mean. There are people in Russia who realize that this is insanity, and the world is not after them. For heaven's sake,
it's
the
ridiculous.
world is not after them.
Well, he knows that too, really, or he used to. But how else he's going to hold on to power? It reminds me more increasingly of Saddam, who said, "It will be the war of all wars," and then, the same thing happened to his army. That is happening to the Russian army.
That thinking was, in a sense, rational when there were enough Russians to throw as cannon fodder into any war that they fought. Right? It no longer is. They don't have the demographics, and they still have this way of thinking that we can literally steamroll over anything because we have so many people. There is the famous Russian phrase, "Людей у нас много." We have many people.
We have many people, but they have the steepest population decline amongst the main countries in the world by far. Tony, what do you hear about what's the discussion that you're having with people about the nuclear possibilities? I mean, it's all over the internet. I mean, Petraeus is talking about it. All the ex-generals are talking about it. But what do you hear from your context?
From my community, the intelligence community here, especially in the Baltics, that he has the capability of doing a low-grade tactical nuclear attack, and in his alleged annexed regions, and he will do it. It's just a matter of how far he's going to be pushed. So we need to either get to him before that or anything else happens. That's the squawk that we have. But as far as anything else...
We need to do what? We need to get to him?
We need to get him out of power as soon as humanly possible.
Right, okay.
Not by killing him or anything.
But somebody else taking over, yeah.
Somebody else taking over that's a rational individual.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think he has that... We believe that he has absolutely lost his mind. He's on the borderline of insanity.
That really is the psychotic before, but now on the border of going psycho, like in the movie, Mama in the rocking chair.
Most likely, but the way that he's acting like a complete imbecile, not rational, not thinking like a leader. KGB operatives absolutely had rational thinking. He is beyond rational thinking.
And do you think his own security forces are eyeing him with horror at the moment?
Yes, there's severe distrust amongst his forces right now. There is absolutely no conviction of trust or believing that he will actually do the right calls and the right maneuvers. I think that they're just doing that. Most of his leadership are just trying to save their grace and not get killed by opposing him and trying to tell him no. We touched on that a couple months ago, where we said that the leaders of him are just playing puppets, even though they're extremely against him. A lot of the news videos that we've seen and analyzed, all those people in there are absolutely in disdain. They're just put there and they're forced to be there to listen to this idiot talk. But the absolute consensus is that they can not wait for him to be gone.
Right. That's very, very interesting. Ivo, comment?
Well, let's hope that there are people out there who understand the implications of what would happen if he goes for that red button. So yeah, that's.
Well,
I mean, and in a sense, you know, nothing has. I mean, nothing has changed. He's threatened with nuclear weapons right on the very day of the invasion. So,
right.
So yeah, it boils down to the you know the bifurcation, you know, palace screw or nukes.
Here's an interesting thing that it actually, and I bring this to us as fathers. We all have well, some of us have. I don't know. Will, do you have a kid?
Yeah.
Okay. How did we handle
Only at
them
Christmas,
as teenagers?
though. I rent them.
No. But how did we handle them as teenagers when they were being extremely arrogant and they were trying to push their issues, and they threatened us by leaving to say as they were going to run away?
Help them to go.
Exactly. How do we
Pack
help
their
him
bag.
go? That's how this guy, he's acting like a complete and utter teenager. He's a teenager with a nuclear football and a button that he's able to push.
So he's
and he's
regressed.
the only authority that can do it.
Maybe it's some form of senility he's regressing to some, you know. I mean, I'm no psychologist, but obviously. Although I do have the glasses for it, and I am a very sympathetic listener.
No, but you may be spot on. You may be on it. We don't know, because he is such a reclusive individual. He is very, very, very secretive in his movements, his food, and he has extreme mannerisms that he has people connected to him to protect him. It's ridiculous the lengths he goes to protect everything of his. It's ridiculous. But the one thing that we have to, as people that are actually able to action on it, is to get him out of the office. Even his oligarchs want him gone. Ex-oligarchs are leaving. His civilian populace are gone. I mean, hell, the rest of the world right now, there's an interesting poll that you sent out that is actually spot on. But
let's talk about that poll that was on one of the American YouTube shows. Go ahead.
Yeah, Roger. So that poll says that the 80% of the people polled believe that we are already on the verge of World War III. Now, why do you think that we're on the verge of World War III? The nuclear watch that we all have been growing up to see right now, where it reaches midnight, I believe, where it reaches midnight, and then we're at global war with nuclear war. That is actually closer to that than it's ever been. It's probably about a minute or two away, and normally it's been 5 or 6 minutes away, and that's always been the standard because people are always warring, but this time it's there because of this idiot.
Yeah, that's why I started drinking again. I'd quit for about 5 years, and now I'm just drinking straight whiskey all the time. In fact, that's what's in this cup. Because what the heck?
That explains a lot.
What?
That explains why the beginning was interesting.
Oh, okay.
No, but in all seriousness, this guy, those polls were interested of not only from the United States, but it was other countries that had it. So there was 17,000 people, and out of those 17,000 people, 80% of them believe that we are at World War III.
Yeah, it's very scary that when you get a preponderance, that kind of preponderance, or a majority of people believing, then that means that's in the consciousness, right? I don't want to go too Jungian on you, but Jung talked about the powerful nature of our collective unconscious. That's in the consciousness. And it's, I mean, I find myself waking up and going, oh yeah, this is getting, I mean, it creates below your everyday demeanor this real level of neurosis, I think, and that's pervading everything.
Well, and when you look at the official Kremlin propaganda, when you look at people like Mrs. What's her name, Simonyan or Skabayeva or Solovyov, you know, there is this strange death cult almost.
Yeah, Millerism.
It's
the end of the world is nigh. Yeah.
It's no, I mean, let's do it. Let's go for it. You know, let's go for it.
Let's make the end of the world nigh.
So in a sense, you know, though, because Russia cannot lose, so it's impossible. Yeah, there's in the paradigm, Russia simply cannot lose, and we have World War II to prove. And I think this balloon can be very easily burst, because why did Russia win in the Second World War? Well, because it had two things it does not have now. Infinite, almost infinite human capital, human resource, human, the actual cannon fodder, and millions of soldiers who died
From all those different
from all over the Soviet Union, and it had American weapons through the Land-Lease
given
Act.
them.
Yes, so they don't have these two things. So it has to slowly dawn on them that they just picked the wrong side when they decided to throw their lot in with Putin.
Gosh, I wish we had Olgierd here. We could ask him about the Chinese, because he studies that intensely all the time, being a lecturer in that subject and a fluent Chinese speaker and writer. I tried to get him, but he's teaching, because I wanted him to chime in on the China situation, if I can use that alliteration, and assonance to boot. Good Lord, like W.H. Auden over here. Did I tell you about the time? Never mind. Anyway, China must be looking at this and saying, good Lord, you're upsetting the apple cart for us here. We got enough internal problems. You've got enough internal problems. Why are you doing this? I mean, you're going to kill our economy, which is the only thing that's keeping us from having a revolution in China.
Let's not forget that China has recently guaranteed the independence of Kazakhstan, which was in the Russian sphere. So basically China said no. Why? Well, because I think that Xi Jinping felt cheated by Putin, who
How do you feel
told him,
cheated?
well, he probably will, we can guess, he probably told him that it's going to be a special military operation, and within a week, the weakness of Ukraine, the weakness of the West, will lead to a regime change in Ukraine, and Ukraine falling into the Russian Soviet sphere of influence for good. And suddenly, 200 days later, nothing really changed, except the fact that Putin's weakness is for everyone in the world to see, and the Russian army is humiliated on the front line. So is he someone you would like to be friends with if you're China? Not really.
Yeah.
He becomes, not even a junior partner. He becomes a liability for China. So they have to sort of wiggle their way out of this whole mess. And, I don't think China ever wants to start a nuclear war, because,
Well, China does not aggressively attack other countries.
Not yet, right? We have the issue of Taiwan. But
they never have.
But
Taiwan is kind of, it's next door to them.
things like that.
History,
but not a full-scale war with a competitor that has,
Well, Japan attacked them. China didn't attack Japan.
Well, that's true. But,
for example.
But if China were to go to war with the United States, we're talking, maybe 2 aircraft carriers on the Chinese side and 6 times as many on the U.S. side. So they're realists.
And submarines.
That's not how they play. They play a chess game.
It's not in their interest.
And what's happening in Ukraine now is basically telling China, Russia is toxic. Don't. Well, that's why they now claimed, okay, Kazakhstan, you are able to be free. You don't have to be.
And they have oil.
They have everything.
Just like Azerbaijan. And the Russians are in Armenia. Azerbaijan is independent.
Losing. And again, because they have to siphon off troops from the east to the Ukrainian front, they're losing their grip on Central Asia, on the Caucasus. This is, again, something that's boiling. That's another problem that Putin is faced with. And China is just sitting back and looking, oh, my God, this guy lied to us.
We're running out of time. Thank you very much. Ivo, will there be tactical nuclear weapons used, yes or no, in the near future?
No. He does not know. He does not understand. So how much of the brevity and the consequences that would be. I think the world will hopefully recognize that they need to stop him before that. So I believe no.
Thank you very much for the last word. Thank you, everybody, for watching. May I say, you're looking well. Please stay that way.